Hey everybody, Rob here. It's time for another story from the Pro Revenge Archives. Yes, Mrs. Smith, I can f***ing read. Let's jump right in. Thank you for subscribing, and if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button for more daily Reddit stories. Please forgive the necessary backstory. I don't know why, but for some reason, the teachers and administrators who ran my strict Catholic elementary school decided that I was lying about my reading and writing abilities. Yeah, look, I don't get it. I really don't. Every year, I'd start the semester having to prove I was actually doing my own English homework. They could never prove I was cheating, so they eventually settled on measuring me against the smartest girl in the class, Kathy. I hated Kathy. Here's an example of this comparison business. We've been assigned a book to read. We read the first chapter aloud in class. I like the book, so I take it home and finish it. Whoop-de-doo. Next day, we're supposed to read the second chapter in our designated reading time. Given that I could usually read a book or two a day, a chapter doesn't take long, so I read it. And then I was done. I start reading my own book. OP, we're reading book right now. Read your book later. I read it. Then read it again. So I did. She stood there and watched me and then said, I said to read the chapter, OP. I did. I said read, not skim. I did read it. Kathy, what page are you on? 15, ma'am. Okay, OP. Kathy is the best reader in the class. If she's not past page 15, then neither are you. And that was that. I was too shy and embarrassed to really protest, so I didn't. I'd just stare and stare at the same page until Kathy turned her page. And then I turned mine. This was agonizingly boring, and it happened almost every day. After about 5 or 6 years of this issue, I was pretty pissed about it. Year after year, semester after semester, day after day, being told that I couldn't read as well as Kathy, when reading was the only f***ing thing I was absolutely sure I was good at. It ate at me. Rage and humiliation and frustration and just a lot of self-hate for not being able to speak up, to force the issue to the point where I could prove I was a good reader. It stung. And in the 5th grade, I finally saw it. Vengeance. You see, my school did this thing called accelerated reading, which was fancy talk for get kids to read a book and take a quiz on it for points. They enforced it by making it a part of our English grade. Each student had a minimum set of points they need to make by the end of the year. They made it competitive by offering a pizza party to the class of the school's top reader. The top reader every year was Kathy. Oh, whoever had Kathy in their class, my grade had 4 classes, so the winning class varied. Oh, so loved having Kathy in their class. The end of the year pizza party was a shoo-in to whoever had Kathy, after all. She was so smart, so good at reading. She only needed to make a base score to pass, you know, but Kathy loved to achieve so much that she would usually make double that score. So impossible to beat her. She really loved reading, you know? You might be wondering, OP, if you so good at reading, why didn't you overachieve and kick her ass? 3 reasons. 1, apathy. I gave up trying in school a long time ago, largely because of my teachers. 2, I was one of the students that had to be supervised to make sure I didn't cheat. I never f***ing cheated, you shitbag. Okay. Thanks to this, I was too embarrassed to ask to take the tests until the last semester. 3. 1st through 4th graders were locked into tests on books on their reading level. Solid idea, in theory, preventing kids from cheating the system and guessing their way through high point value tests instead of reading. But do you want to know how many points a f***ing Hank the Cowdog book was worth? 2, 3 if you're lucky. And that was the high end of point value for those reading levels. Most were in the half points. If I wanted to pass, I had to read about 10 to 15 kid books, and God, I was so far beyond that by that point. So yeah, combined with my general lack of f***s, I'd usually wait till the last minute and then take all the tests at once and just barely scrape a pass. This probably didn't help with my teacher's poor impression of my reading level, come to think of it. But fifth graders had free reign to take any test they wanted. Any test at all. I remember looking at my English syllabus on the first day of school and seeing that holy, blessed freedom. I looked up at the back of Kathy's head in the class across the hall. I could win. But then I realized I could do better than win. I could destroy her, and prove once and for all who the alpha reader in the school was. I could destroy her and show stupid Mrs. Smith and Mrs. James that they were f***ing wrong. I could read. I was the best reader. I could do it. But I needed patience. I couldn't let anyone know what I was up to. I couldn't tip my hand too early and drive the competition up. See, at this time, Kathy's highest score was 45 points. She fully intended to make at least 80 points for her last year, and the other kids were properly competing now that any book was game. The final pizza party was on the line after all. I didn't want anyone realizing a new contender was in the ring. I wanted my victory to be a landslide. I knew it could be a landslide with the arsenal of books I'd read over the years. So I waited. I didn't take any AR test, despite my teachers urging and punishing me for failing to meet my quarterly minimums. I suffered embarrassment, timeouts from recess, loss of field trips for low grades, my parents' confusion, but nothing could move me from the plan. My score stayed at 0. Kathy exceeded her own expectations, finishing the year with 92 points. I remember the last Friday, the last day to take tests, and my classmates struggling to get even half as many points as her. The next kid in line had 60 points. Me, I was still at 0, just as planned. After school, instead of going to the homework room in after-school care, I went to the library with Mrs. Riley to take my AR tests, since I still had to be supervised. This was fine. I needed a witness. I started taking tests. I took all of the tests. Every book I'd ever read that was available to be tested, I tested. All of the Babysitter's Club, all of Sweet Valley High, all the Nancy Drew, the Hardy Boys, the great illustrated classics, the unabridged versions of those same books, every Jack London novel, all of those Dive and Everest survival books, the 3 Harry Potter books that were out, all of the Calvin and Hobbes and Garfield comics. I even took tests on freaking Goosebumps, Animorphs, The Magic Treehouse, and all of those f***ing Hank the Cowdog books. Those are just the series. I read loads of standalone books and tested on them. I can't even freaking remember them all. Every goddamn book I had ever read, I tested. It took hours. About 1 hour in, Mrs. Riley tried to stop me, but I shocked both of us when I very firmly told her, no, I'm not stopping until I'm done. I'd never spoken to an adult like that in my life. It doesn't sound like much, but I was the quietest, shyest, most pathetic thing when it came to adults, especially teachers. I barely looked up at them. Later, my father came to pick me up. I told him I had to take all of these tests. Mrs. Riley told my dad that I'd passed. I was fine grade-wise. He tried to make me leave. I wasn't having it. For the second time, I managed to speak up for myself. I ended up standing on the chair, screaming at my dad, I'm not leaving until I win. I told him I had to make the highest score. I had to win. I couldn't leave until I'd won. I think I was crying, almost hyperventilating. He never seen me act like this and didn't know what to do except to let me take the tests. Mrs. Riley and my dad let me take tests until about midnight. At that point, the program locked itself. No more tests could be taken. The year's competition was over. I could see my score and I was laughing and crying and just a f***ing mess. Mrs. Riley just hugged me. Writing this out now, she was seriously cool to actually stay so late and let this sobbing mess of a child do this. My incredibly concerned but kinda proud dad took me home. I couldn't wait for Monday. You see, they announced the winners of the AR competition over the intercoms to the whole school. I'd timed my victory perfectly. By keeping a 0, my name was never added to the school's scoreboard. By waiting until the last day to test, the board wasn't updated with my score. Kathy was still the victor as far as anyone knew. No one knew the truth. No one but Mrs. Riley. Mrs. Riley, who was in charge of the contest as the librarian and knew I'd won legitimately. I spent the entire morning hour with the biggest f***ing grin on my face. I grinned through prayer, through the pledge, through the unrelated announcements. I was so excited, I laughed when the principal started reading the AR winners. My classmates clearly thought I was nuts. My teacher, f***ing Mrs. Smith, who was by far and above the worst teacher I'd ever had, kept shushing me. I could not be shushed. Kathy was in the class across the hall. I could see her back and the confident faces of her classmates as they waited for the announcement of their inevitable victory. And then it happened. The second place winner is Kathy in Class B with 92 points. My classmates gasped. The class across the hall gasped. Kathy actually jerked with shock. And the winner is OP in Class C with a grand total of 458 points. I kinda want to end it there, but you guys need to know what happened next. Nothing. F***ing nothing. My classmates, my teacher, the class across the hall, many of whom had come to their door and were staring at my eating grin, were silent. You could hear a pin drop. Every rustle of uniform, sweet, glorious shock. 6 f***ing years, half of my life at that age, and they all thought I was stupid, that I was slow. Mrs. Smith, Mrs. James, Mrs. Riley, all wrong. I won, and none of them saw it coming. It was amazing. Mrs. Smith thought I cheated, of course, but I had Mrs. Riley and finally my parents as backup. And now I need to pause because, well, as you might assume, there's more to this story than just a little misunderstanding about my reading level. This petty revenge was the highlight of these years, but it was far from the only problem I had. Early puberty, childhood depression, and my shy, friendless nature made me a particularly juicy target for bullying and, in hindsight, pretty extreme sexual harassment from my peers and older students. Alongside that, many of my bullies were children of the administration who weren't keen on their children getting in trouble. So while I'm focusing solely on one particular problem here, just sort of remember that it's the surface of my problems, not the meat. Because the confidence I gained from completing this plan and earning the awe and respect of my classmates finally gave me the strength to tell my parents what was happening to me, how I was being harassed, how my teachers treated me. They transferred me out immediately, giving me the greatest exit any bullied child could dream of, a big bang, proving once and for all that those bastards were f***ing wrong about me, beating Kathy, who, thinking on it now, didn't do anything but exist to be everything I supposedly wasn't, and I kinda feel bad for ruining her moment, and blowing the whistle on my bullies. I left behind legacy of my passing. Last I heard, it took the rest of the Harry Potter books and some serious dedication for another 5th grader to beat my record over a decade later. This story hits home for me on so many levels. I was the bullied kid back in elementary school. I also loved to read, and we would have reading competitions where we had to record our minutes. Mine would always be about 3 times higher than everybody else. I love this story. Thank you, OP. It brought back some great memories for me. I want to thank OP for posting their story to the Pro Revenge subreddit. You can visit them at the links in the description below. Please go there and give them an upvote. Once again, this is Rob from Karma Comment Chameleon saying thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and share it with your friends. And we'll see you in the next one.